Is someone that I think we all know, and some of us know him better than others. He's known for his high placement and intelligence in the coal industry. I don't think there's anybody else that knows more about coal in Kentucky that I know of, and possibly not in the nation. But he's also a fantastic entrepreneur, started a lot of companies, did a lot of products, and I'm hoping he's talk about a lot of it. So John Bowles needs some introduction.
Well, I don't know if I can stand up to the billing. We're just getting into. Anyway, I was raised on a farm in Anton, Kentucky, 6 miles out of Madisonville. I worked on the farm, so I was 16, was still working on the farm. My granddaddy Jackson had he wanted to clear some new ground, so I wound up buying a sawmill. I was working on cutting the timber, and didn't have no way to get it cut up. So Homer Thomas had a sawmill. He said, well, I'll sell it to you and I'll run it till you cut enough to get me paid for the contract for wood at the coal mine. So I went from the farming to the sawmill to work for Badgett in Chicago. Started in Chicago when I was 18, widening the cattle. There was a sanitation channel widening from 120 foot to 320 foot. So I worked there for a couple of years. They started back, getting ready to go back to coal mining, and back in Hopkins County, Muhlenberg. So I learned to run a drill up there they had trouble with. And then Rod Badgett told me they had a new one here at Joey Drill. Had trouble with this. He said, I got an 18-year-old boy to run that thing. And of course, that created a problem when I come back, and I did run it. But I had some of the older guys that resented it a little bit. Other than that, everything went pretty well. So then I got a partnership in coal mining in '68. I was 10% owner, the other person was 90%. It went the wrong way, as Harry said. It wasn't profitable. But so then I got back into business with 4 people, 3 of them out of Chicago that was selling coal, Keith Brothers. I was running the mine, working every day, working on that. They run the business part and handle the money, but it went the wrong way too. So after that, in '72, that's when it been a cost plus contract. And how do you go broke with a cost plus contract? Never filed bankruptcy, but I was a part of it. 25% owner on that one. So anyway, I was working for Brown Badgett, running the Perfect Circle mine and the Allen mine on the second shift. So I had 2 coal mines, and Brown was pretty happy. I was doing a good job. He called me up one day and said, come out of the office. I come out of the office and said, you know what you've done? I said, no, what have I done? He said, you're running 20,000 more ton of coal a month for the same people, same equipment that we ever run. So I was pretty proud of that. I didn't know what I was going to hear when I put it in there. So anyway, I worked for him for a little over a year. Raj, the oil embargo of '74 come up. That's when coal prices, oil prices went through the roof comparably. And Raj called me in and said, if you're ever going to get back in, heal those wounds you got, you need to get back in now. And of course, I was pretty well down, and everything I said, well, Raj, I don't have any equipment, I don't have any credit, I would think, I don't know. So every excuse I made, he had an answer for him. He said, I got a permit, I've got property, and he showed me that and said, well, what do you need? I had 1 or 2, an old dozer, some trucks and things. So he loaned me a drill, loaned me Uke trucks. I rented a backhoe, started out here west of Madison on the east side of the Penrock. And in about 9 months' time, it was in March when I started. By the end of the year, I didn't have to because of the corporation, but Madisonville Auto Parts, Tom and Bob Florida at the time, E.L. and Don Robinson at the tire place, owed money to it. I went by and talked to all them. They said, yeah, we'll give you credit. So by the end of the year, I paid, everything was owed by the other companies. I paid it off. But they were good enough to give me credit. Of course, Raj was good enough to help me out. He treated me like a son, really. And we were real close friends, Rod Badgett, until he died. So he helped me a lot, I have to say that. And they were brilliant people, Brown, Rod, actually all 3 of them. And they did a lot of Madisonville also. But a lot of times they'd be talking about something I'd kind of lose, and I couldn't figure out where they were coming from. But when you seen the rest of the store, they were very great on business, so I give them a lot of credit for everything. So then I started Charlotte, of course, over there in March of '74. And we grew from, I finished the store at the end of the year, we paid everybody, had bought some equipment, didn't owe no money. I had, new trucks, new cars, debt free. My wife, Debbie, said, well, let's quit before you lose it all. We had and she was saying, well, we need to quit. You make a living working on cars, which was true. But I didn't quit. It's kind of like Harris, he had some bad licks. So then Raj come back to me and wanted to start Donbo Mine. I mean, they named it Donbo Mine. So we started that mine, ran it from '75 to '78. He sold his company. He called me in the office again and said, what do you think about selling Donbo? He was a partner in that too. And he didn't own any of Charlotte. It was all mines. Up till I sold out. I sold out and a little bit of cold coffee. So anyway, we sold out in '78 because Rod said, well, you're selling one load at a time, why not sell it all at once? So he was right. We sold it, but that's really where we did real well on it. We'd run 3 years, and I think my part was $3 million. That was a big lick for me. So back when times got a little tougher after that, I still had Charlotte. Having everything paid for and no debt, that allowed me to survive. Basically, coal mining has been up, down. All the history that I can think of, it's been that way. But getting back to the mining industry, as we grew Charlotte, we had 250 direct employees. We run 2.5 million tons a year. We was one of the larger, still a small company in the eyes of large companies are 500 employees or more. We had like 250 direct. Our gross income was about $70 million a year of gross, which the coal dollar circulates about 7 times. We had a study that the coal industry did. And every coal dollar that comes to town circulates 7 times before it leaves. And the name of service tax, property tax, all the different tax, service tax, which is used for economic development and everything. And of course, coal production is down in East Kentucky. The war on coal has really hurt a lot. I think this past year of 13, the coal service tax is $212 million. That's way down from what it was. So anyway, I ran the company until '06. End of '06, we sold it again. I could see what was coming, a war on coal. And I was lucky I did sell it at the time. And because it's really, really tough. I think if it was today, I would have never made it. Because it's sold, you got Alliance Coal, Armstrong Coal, primarily the two in West Kentucky. And thankful for them because there's a lot of money. Like a continuous miner today, it's $2.5 million for one. Alliance Coal's got like 50 of them running in Hopkins County. That helps the county from the standpoint of property tax, just like a car or anything else. They pay the same rate on the mining equipment as you do on anything else. So there's a lot of money coming from the mining coal and the coal equipment as well as service tax. So coal does a lot, still does a lot. The service tax was started to fund, businesses that comes to town to replace coal when it's no longer here. But so far, I was on economic development too, and a number of them we gave package of no tax of any kind for 15 years. Well, I don't believe for one, a good company, very good company, but with all that, the regulations in America, the environmental regulation, over-regulating, other regulations, they moved to Mexico. We got about 7 years after we were here. Land of Frost is still here. And when I was on economic development, we flew to Chicago and picked them up in my plane at no cost to anybody 2 or 3 times, and they're still here operating. So we brought a lot of businesses in, trying to help the community. And so coal has really been for me anyway. I tell everybody, mining coal, I just plow deeper on the farm. I said, we got a 100-foot wide pit and a 100+ foot deep, but before I had a 6-inch furrow, about 12 inches wide, so we had when I grew up on the farm. But anyway, that's kind of the story of that. And I've got some bullet points I'd like to tell you about it. Where coal's at today, the war on coal compared to what it was. The peak in 1990 of coal production was 80 million tons in Kentucky. Today it's 53% less, it's decreased by 53%. You got in 2008 the total coal production in the United States was 16% less. In the 3 counties, Muhlenberg used to be the #1 coal producer. In Kentucky, you got Union County is #1, Pike County in the east is #2, Hopkins County is #3. We're pretty fortunate to still be #3. If it wasn't for allies, primarily, we wouldn't be. We've got 1980 was a drastic decline in coal. We had 1,858 mines, life mines in Kentucky. Today, this is the latest information got to 13, there's 279 coal. That's how much we depreciate. The production, and most people don't realize that in 2013, there were 11,885 people directly working in the coal mine. Back in back in 1981, there's 48,000 people working in direct coal miners. That's a lot of payroll, a lot of health care, provided by the mines. Most of them pay 100% of it. I know we did in health care for the whole family, not just miner. I know the last full year I worked I run a mine in 06, our cost per employee for health care was $18,000 per employee. Our workers' comp was $12,000. And of course, they have real insurance, so we also paid the insurance tax on that too, which is called jail tax. So just a little history there. The natural gas, of course, being used more, in production. If you listen to the TV, you'd think it was all produced by natural gas. But coal's still 40% in the United States. It's around 91% in Kentucky. The uranium enrichment plant at Paducah shut down in February. But they were the largest consumer of power. You hear about ethanol, biodiesel, how much energy it takes. But TVA bartered electric power, 3,024 megawatts. That's a lot of power for fuel. So they didn't show any cost on fuel for nuclear plants. And they didn't show anything for disposal. When I was chairman of in Murray, the board on energy there, it was $32 billion estimated to dispose of the waste at Paducah, just Paducah alone. So that's never been factored in. And then in 1980, TVA finally got the nuclear plants where they'd stay online, but it was 17 cents a kilowatt at that time for wholesale power, and coal was 2 cents. So they price averaged it, so you've been paying ever since 80. You've been paying for the nuke plants. Of course, it's got up to 21% of the power. 21 is nuclear, 40 is coal. That's 61. So the rest of it's wind, solar, and wind and solar, only about 3%. You would think as many as we got, that there'd be a lot more than that, but it didn't. And as their coal service tax, this year was $212 million. Of course, 50% comes back to the county. The people with MAPCO coal lands now alliance, but people with Peabody and MAPCO, Jay McCoy, myself, is who work on that, trying to get the service tax, we asked for 100% back to the county, because Jefferson County was getting the biggest share of it, being the biggest county. And we was getting all kind of negative press from, Louisville Courier-Journal and people in Louisville, and I thought, well, they don't deserve to get the biggest share of service tax. But anyway, we got 50%. Of course, the state said, well, if we just give it to the counties, they'll waste it. That was their word. So that's why they come to economic development, to tell you how it's spent. And what I told them when I was on the board, I said, everybody that in businesses would give them the same incentive in every city. If they hired one person or two or three, we'd probably have more employees than we did by trying to fund everybody from another state or out of the country. I still believe that. And you wouldn't lose them all at one time. Like, I'm using Olive for just an example. They're good people, they were friends. But anyway, when they left, a lot of jobs left. So I think the small industry, we need to give every incentive we can, and we give anybody that's competing with it, they'll have that incentive for one employee or as many as they can hire. That's what I think. Any questions on anything?
What about racing, Mr. Bowles? We didn't get to that.
Well, that's my hobby. Yeah, I've been racing since '61. I was working on some friends' cars here. It was 2 Pontiacs and a Chevrolet at the time. And I said, and I'd get teased all the time if they didn't win the race. Local Sturgis around Owensboro, different places. I'd get teased, and I said, well, next year you got to beat me and the car. And the way you got the Pontiac or the Chevrolet, and I said, a Ford. And they just thought it was the funniest thing they ever heard, this spell. But it didn't last too long. By the middle of the year, 3 guys had to quit. So anyway, I had a lot of success over the years before that. I don't know, Jack Rouse in '72, I had a new Mustang before we quit racing. I tore it down to what we call blueprint, balance and clearance and all that. And couldn't find the gaskets, put it back together. So the people that was doing diesel engines too, working on them, my supplier for head gaskets, made it had to make 1,000 was the smallest they could make. So they made the head gasket with 351 Cleveland motor. And I had only head gaskets, so for NASCAR, Jack, Bob Glidden, I sold them the head gaskets. I had about 1,000 at a time, so I didn't need that many. So I've been working with Jack Rouse ever since '72. We're still good friends. And in '05, they called me to come to Dearborn at Ford, and 2 of the Rouse engineers wanted to met me there. And that's when the experimental engine was. I had the car at Ford dealership here through the winter. That was a 7-liter engine. What they told me was, we want to come back with muscle car of the 60s. We want to come out with the 427s and 63 and 64. The Hemi come out in 64. And be better, more durable. So this is a brand new engine. And the truck engine was a 6.2-liter, 4-inch bore, because of emission dual spark plugs, because with your hydrocarbons and that you travel with ignition, you can shorten it down and then you can run it at ignition. You don't need as high a timer. And with, you can get a better burn and it keeps for emissions primarily by the dual spark plugs. I mean, the Chrysler engine's got them too. So when we come to the verbal out timing, I always dreamed of it. We named it the 777 because Ford said we want 7-liter, 7,000 RPM, 700 horsepower. We want to bring it out in '09 in the new Mustang. And in the truck, 6.2-liter and 10. And they did put it in the truck. And he did take one of my engines and run the Baja with it. Come in third, but they got stopped by a wreck. Is the reason they didn't wreck, but on the Baja, 1,000 mile in the desert in the dirt. But it was faster than the truck there. When they brought it back, they said, well, it's got a little wearing in the dirt and sand. I still got the first prototype in my shop sitting in the workbench in the car too. So we won a number of races with that car. Ford still hadn't come out with a 7-liter. it's got in their archives, in time they'll come out with it. They tested it also with propane being a truck. It made 850 foot-pound of torque in that truck version. But I got through with it, it was 700, but 850. That's what we made with it, running on ethanol. They want to use ethanol. I help the people at Hopkins did help with their ethanol plant. It's all farmer owned, and 2,800 farmers have all that. It's really good co-op. I mean, they got the advantage of whatever product they get, what the corn at their market prices, the grain, and then they get, if they use ethanol, whatever margin there is, farmers get truly a co-op, all the farmers own. You sell grain, if you miss 2 years not selling grain, then you can't vote for the officers. And in 5 years, if you don't sell grain, they'll buy you stock, which is pretty fair. It's the best deal I know for farmers, which we need. The farmers go through the same thing coal has.
If you were giving good advice to someone that wanted to start a business, what would you say to them?
Well, in the coal industry today, they've got it so regulated, and the bonding per acre. If you had $50 million, I would tell you, find something else, because we just went back to a big company, you know, public companies, the only one that can afford it or stand it in the uncertainty. You'd never be able to get that credit or get bonding. Of course, you can't get bonding really anymore. The land and equipment, you know, you need to put in a mine big enough to compete kind of like farming. You need about $300 or $400 million.
What, I know you're a person who doesn't like to stay still, so is there anything you're working on now?
Yeah, we got the FR9 engine I'm working on now. We're also working on a process where we can grow trees, and we don't have all the details yet, but where we can make jet fuel or diesel fuel and gasoline out of wood product. That's renewable. The trees will grow back after 7 years. They'll be like 50 foot tall, about 24 inches of stump. You don't destroy the stump, it grows back up in 3 years and harvest it again. In fact, if we get that done, that'll be a miracle. I mean, if we can get that done, because you have a renewable. Recycling not the issue, but the thing. You know, we're right now exporting diesel fuel because you can't burn in this country, but you can burn in any of the other countries. Like China, India, all that's where all the equipment has got the standard we had back in 03, 04. So yeah, that's something that could, I think, be a breakthrough. I'm also working on a fuel additive when we maybe use propane, where you can take high performance, old muscle cars, and you put just a small amount of propane with the calibration. And we got NOx sensors we developed for all 8 cylinders. So run regular gas, plain old regular gas, so the cruise and idle, that's all you need. And we calibrate it, it'll give it the fuel additive that it needs. The NOx sensors will keep it from hurting itself. You won't have detonations that destroy the engine. Have the regular gas all the time, and propane is about $1.60 to $2, so it's cheaper than regular gas.
Yeah.
It would be a big breakthrough, because you can run that high performance, and like the new eco boost that Ford got, GM's putting turbos and superchargers and all that stuff too. So we got a boost in the engine, it's low compression, it's perfect. You bring the boost up, give the fuel in the right tune. I mean, all it needs is to have tremendous power. I got an FR9 engine, which is the latest Ford NASCAR. Mine's 389 cubic inch, where they're running 358, so mine's got a longer stroke. I make 1,098 horsepower with it.
Don, what's the chances we hit the CAFE standards of, what, 50-something miles a gallon?
Well, part of it, if you didn't have to comply with emissions, that's a big part of it.
And that's not going away, is it? The emissions requirement?
Well, I don't know. After the election, I'm hoping for a miracle. Any other questions? Racing, coal, anything? If I know, I'll be glad to.
I have a question. I don't think a lot of people realize, and I love the funny stories that you tell me when you're at the track with your experimental engines and people walk by and see Don's cars. This one young kid said, "Is that your car?" I said, "Where's your driver at?" And Don said, "I'm the driver." The kid laughed. I won't say what he said. And then Don raised it. But for me, you know, I've been the pleasure of working in sports med training Don. You know, I'm not going to say his age, but I think the nearest youngest driver, and you're talking 4 or 5 Gs going from 0 to 160, 70 miles an hour. The youngest competitor I've seen next to you was like 20 years younger. You had a bad year this year, but I mean, the last few years, you're racing not here, not at like Windy Hollow and not these dirt tracks. You're going around the nation and winning points championships. And for me, seeing someone at that age drag racing is phenomenal. I mean, you know, you've done pretty well, but I mean, you're still actively racing cars.
I won a championship in 13.
15 years ago, maybe 16 years ago, we did we didn't have any money to WTPL toy drive, and I just come on board there. And Don was on the board for the toy drive, and we decided to do an event out at the airport where we would raise money and people would give airplane rides. He did his helicopter, and he had his race car there. And after he got done, you know, he just tickled me to death. He's like, "Well, do you want to go for a ride?" I said, "Well, yeah." Well, first of all, you don't realize how hard it is for even a normal sized person to get in the daggone vehicle, because it's just like, oh God, I'm not going to make it in. And then when he went down the road, like you're talking about the torque, it's like, oh my God. And by the time you get done with that, you're at the end. And it was a fascinating event. It's probably one of the highlights of my whole life. That was so
It's a
exciting.
rush, isn't it?
It was a big rush. I can see why you do it and why you're so
Yeah, the
passionate
state
about it.
police car, they were out there in the sheriff's office, and we did like a mock race, you know, and they're fine. He said, "I believe I can beat you." I said, "Okay, we're ready now." We had the runway, you know, cleared because there no airplanes coming. I said, "Well, come on." He said, "No, let's sit there and I'll clock you. You just go." So I went by him, and well, I don't know, this got a tachometer. How fast? I don't know, but fast. And when I pulled back to the side and shut mine off, I said, "You ready?" He said, "Ain't no way."
I mean, Don, what are some of your recent years, your best times and your best speeds? I mean, you're pulling a lot of Gs, but in the distance you're
in an
going.
eighth mile, I run like 100 was, just run over 140 in an eighth mile, 140.46 in 5 seconds from the standing start. Quarter mile, like 791 and 174.
And these are gasoline engines, these aren't
It's a
nitrous.
gasoline engine, 2.5-inch tire to know you're loud on it. So your handicap there, you gotta kill that 200 to 300 horsepower to get it in low gear. But you either stand up and blow the tires off.
And you've had some wrecks the last few years too.
Yeah, I've had all the wrecks. I've never had a wreck on the highway. I've had 2 on the racetrack. In the last, well, I had one in '09 when I hit water up in Pennsylvania, and the car got loose and went up kind of smacking the wall. But the worst one has a mile in Michigan. The wheelie bar, parachute come out at the end, and the wheelie bar caught it in the wheelie bar and picked the whole car up, and it was going sideways because it was airborne. And it was a 6-foot concrete wall, and it hit it right at the top and knocked it over. It had to bounce back because the door was hanging on the end of the wall where it peeled it up and took the whole side out of the car. The roll cage is always left inside there. But all the latest super Hans, all the latest equipment, I didn't get hurt. Sore, but it didn't get hurt.
Wow.
The radar showed it 166 mile an hour when it hit. I got radar on the car too, at 10 to speed. I got lasers that tells you the track temp, the tire temp.
Have you met anybody your age racing like that? Anybody else
There's one
racing?
person in East Kentucky. I don't care, I'm 75, I don't care.
Any other questions? All right. Thank you all for coming today. We will be on task next week with Barnett Straw, the funeral home, and M30 Products, which is manufactured here in Hopkins County. And they'll be our presenters that week. We're off for Thanksgiving, we're off for Christmas weekend, we're off for New Year's, because those are all the days that those things happen. But if there's anybody you'd like to see, please write them down right here, or give me a shout, or Ruben a shout, or Mark Lee a shout, or Carol a shout, because we've got some great people that are saying they're going to come and present at sometime in the near future, and we've got some others that are checking their schedules for the next 2 or 3 weeks. So we appreciate you being here. Follow us on Facebook, and have a fantastic week.